Fire theft. Fu Chun was clutching half a network cable when he plunged from the 52nd floor. The man who pushed him was Meng Yangji, his mentor, the father of China's neural networks, the youngest academician in the field of artificial intelligence. In the instant of the fall, Fu Chun saw Meng Yangji remove his glasses and, with the eyes behind those lenses, calmly watch him accelerate away. There was no rage, no murderous intent, only a calculated certainty, as if he had merely pushed away a mistyped equation. Fu Chen's back smashed through the awning on the 36th floor, crashed into an air conditioning unit on the 29th, and plunged into a pile of waterproofing rolls stacked on the podium rooftop. His spine fractured at the 7th thoracic vertebra. 6 ribs snapped at once. A shard of bone pierced his left lung. Blood welled from his mouth and soaked into the black waterproofing material beneath him. His right hand still clutched that half-network cable. The other end of the cable was connected to the core server, which held Flint, the complete source code for the world's first general-purpose artificial intelligence decision model. Meng Yangji didn't know that, in the very second Fu Chun was pushed, an automated script had already launched, packing all of Flint's source code, along with Fu Chen's digital signature, and uploading it to an encrypted offline cold storage node. Fu Chun lay on that heap of material, staring at the strip of sky cut into a line by the high-rises. From inside the building came the sound of champagne corks popping. The research group was celebrating Flint's passing of its national certification. On the acceptance report, the name signed as chief scientist was Meng Yangji. Fu Chun closed his eyes. He figured he would probably die like this. A young man pushed from a great height, fallen into a corner no one could find, holding a secret no one knew, dying quietly. But he didn't die. 14 years later, Chengdu. Every weekend, a repair market spontaneously formed at the second-hand goods bazaar by the Funan River. The stall at the very back was a folding table and a canvas chair. On the table sat an old oscilloscope and a few tins of rosin. A faded payment QR code was stuck to the corner of the table. Next to it, in crooked handwriting, was written, "Fix anything that carries electricity. No fix, no charge." The stall owner was called Ling Budu. The market regulars called him Ling the Mute. He didn't speak 10 sentences a day. From morning till night, he sat in that canvas chair, wearing a headband magnifier, using tweezers and a soldering iron to repair motherboards, graphics cards, and industrial controllers with the precision of a surgeon performing an operation. His technique was so clean and effortless that professors from the nearby University of Electronic Science and Technology shook their heads, saying a skill like his didn't belong in a second-hand market. It belonged at the Fifth Academy, fixing satellites. Ling Budu never responded to such remarks. He set up his stall at 7 every morning and packed up at 8 every evening. He repaired 20-plus boards a day, charging 50 to 200 yuan each. The money he earned was enough to rent a 300-square-foot apartment in the Fuqin neighborhood and cover 3 meals of rice with toppings a day. No one knew his past, and no one noticed that every time he finished repairing a board, he always wrote a dense string of symbols in a notebook. They looked like circuit diagrams, but not quite like mathematical formulas, but more complex. Over 14 years, he had filled 73 such notebooks. Each one was wrapped in a cover made from old wall calendars, numbered and archived, locked beneath the slats of his bed. If you pieced those symbols together and translated them into computer language, they formed an entirely new artificial intelligence architecture. It wasn't based on deep learning, nor on neural networks, but on a paradigm he called causal entanglement networks. It circumvented all existing AI architectures' dependence on massive data and computing power, and from its foundational logic, thoroughly solved the hallucination problem of large language models. It was called Flint 2.0. Its predecessor was called Flint. 14 years earlier, when Fu Chun wrote the first line of code in that Beijing laboratory, Meng Yangji was still serving as a vice president on the board of an investment firm, mingling in social circles by delivering spiels about neural networks and Eastern philosophy. It was Fu Chun who brought the code to him, saying, "Professor Meng, this framework can be built. I need your support." Meng Yangji looked at the code, remained silent for a long moment, and then said, "All right." The meaning of that, "all right," was not "I support you." It was, "This thing now belongs to me." Ling Budu was sitting in the second-hand market, using a hot air gun to blow on a BGA chip. A broken-screen old phone propped on a stand was live-streaming a special CCTV news program. On the screen, the Beijing National Convention Center was ablaze with lights. Beneath the gold emblem of the 2038 Global AI Ethics Summit, Meng Yangji stood at the podium. Behind him, a 20-meter-wide LED megascreen scrolled through Flint's global deployment data. Covering 68 countries, integrated into 17 industries, serving over 2 billion users. Meng Yangji wore a dark gray Zhongshan suit, pinned with the badge of an academician of the Chinese Academy of Engineering. His hair was immaculate. Using a rich voice polished by countless lectures, he said, 18 years ago, when I wrote the first line of code for Flint in a late-night laboratory, I didn't know it would become what it is today. I only knew that China needed its own general artificial intelligence. Today, the decisions made by Flint every second exceed the sum total of all decisions in human history. Thunderous applause erupted. A woman sat in the very center of the front row. Dark green suit, South Sea pearl earrings, flawless makeup, elegant demeanor. She was Meng Yangji's wife, co-founder and chief operating officer of Yangji Technology Group, Fu Chen's senior from the same research group back then, and also his former girlfriend. Her name was Wen Ruger. Amid the applause, she tilted her head slightly, exchanged a glance with Meng Yangji on the stage, and a tiny, knowing smile played at the corner of her mouth. The live feed cut to Wen Ruger. The host asked her how she viewed the external controversy over the origins of Flint's technology. Her smile didn't waver. Technology doesn't lie. Every line of code in Flint is the crystallization of 18 years of painstaking effort by Yangji's team. Those so-called questions are nothing but the cheap envy of failures directed at the successful. The host asked another question. I heard that your former boyfriend also worked in the AI field back then? She tilted her head slightly, her tone carrying just the right measure of pity. Some people did indeed take some detours. But time is fair. It gives everyone the place they deserve. Ling Budu switched off the hot air gun and used tweezers to pick up the soldered chip, inspecting the joints. His fingers were steady, his breathing even, his eyes unchanged. Only he himself knew that the titanium alloy brace inside his thoracic spine was faintly aching. It was going to rain in Chengdu today. 14 years now. Whenever rain was coming, that brace reminded him with punctual precision he was still alive. The broadcast continued. Meng Yangji announced a major piece of news. Flint 2.0 would pass certification from the UN AI Ethics Committee next month, becoming the world's first trusted AI, labeled general system. It would be integrated into cross-border payments, air traffic control, gene editing, and nuclear power plant operations. Upon the announcement, Yangji Technology's star market share price surged 57%. Its market value broke 3 trillion, surpassing Saudi Aramco to become the most valuable company in the world. Ling Budu put the repaired graphics card back into its casing and wiped the flux from his hands with a rag. He glanced at the stock market app on his phone. Yangji Technology's K-line chart looked like a raised middle finger. He closed the app and dialed an encrypted number. A young man's hoarse voice came through, carrying the fatigue of an all-nighter. Old Fu, I've finished tracing Yangji's overseas capital flows. They've funneled at least $80 million over 5 years to members of AI ethics committees in 17 countries, using shell companies across 6 offshore havens. I've made a table of everyone's receiving accounts, the times, the amounts. Ling Budu was silent for a moment. That's enough. He stood up and began packing his stall. Notify Tang1. Initiate the short. Also, send that bribery list to a Washington Post reporter. Anonymously. Through the dark net. 72 hours later. Geneva. Beneath the circular dome of the Palais des Nations, the final review hearing of the Global AI Ethics Summit was in session. The vote on the ethical certification of Flint 2.0 was the core agenda item. Representatives from 47 nations were about to cast the decisive vote. Meng Yangji was delivering his final technical statement as chief scientist. He stood on the circular podium. The curved megascreen behind him displayed the Flint 2.0 architecture diagram. In fluent British English, he spoke eloquently, moving from Plato to Turing, from the I Ching to neural networks, from 18 years of solitary exploration to a shared future for mankind. At emotional moments, his eyes reddened, and young delegates in the audience began wiping away tears. Just as he prepared to play the ethical compliance demonstration video, every light in the dome went out simultaneously. The emergency lights flicked on. The main screen turned pitch black. Then a line of white text surfaced, in a monospace font, cold and detached, as if spat directly out of an ancient command line terminal. Mengyangji, do you still remember the window on the 52nd floor? Mengyangji's smile froze. His fingers clutched the edge of the podium, his knuckles turning white. The screen continued displaying. 14 years ago, you pushed me out of that window on the 52nd floor of Building C in Beijing's Zhongguancun Software Park. You thought I died. I didn't. Today I've come to take back what you stole from me. Not for revenge. To correct a mistake. You made the world use a murderer's technology for a full 14 years. Every single person who died because of that is on your head. A stir ran through the audience. Journalists raised their phones. Committee members looked at each other. Mengyangji spun sharply toward backstage and hissed into his earpiece. Shut down the screen. Who is attacking the system? Shut it down. No one could shut it down. The screen displayed the first document. Archived patent application records from the State Intellectual Property Office. Inventor Fu Chen. Invention. Full scenario general decision model, based on causal entanglement networks. Application date. November 3rd, 14 years ago. On the 7th day after that date, Fu Chen fell from the 52nd floor. The second document. Internal emails of Yangji Technology. Sender Mengyangji. Recipient. Vice President of Technology. Date. The day after Fu Chen's fall. The message contained one sentence. Clear out everything from Fu Chen's workstation. Servers, hard drives, notebooks, don't leave a single sheet of paper. Then notify legal. Prepare the materials for the patent ownership transfer. Then a piece of audio. Mengyangji's voice, clear as if just recorded. He was too naive. He thought the technology was his, that writing a few lines of code made him the owner. He doesn't understand capital, resources, platforms. Without me, his code was just a pile of waste paper. Pushing him was for his own good. Rather than let him be slowly crushed in this cruel world, I gave him a quick end. Dead silence in the auditorium. Mengyangji's face turned ashen gray. The sound he made scraped like fingernails on a chalkboard. Fabricated. Audio synthesis. AI can synthesize anyone's voice. This is a frame-up. The screen ignored him. It played the fourth file, a high-definition surveillance video. 14 years ago, the hallway on the 52nd floor of Building C in Zhongguancun Software Park. Late at night. Fu Chen stood by the window talking on his phone. Mengyangji approached from behind, his footsteps soft, carrying a titanium alloy crowbar he had taken from the laboratory. Fu Chen didn't turn around. Mengyangji raised the crowbar, hesitated for a second, lowered it, extended both hands and shoved hard. Fu Chen crashed through the window and vanished into the night. Mengyangji stood before the window, glanced down once, then pulled out his phone, made a call and spoke a few words. Lip-reading experts later reconstructed those words. Rugu, the matter is resolved. Prepare the patent ownership documents on your end. Sign them first thing tomorrow morning. When Rugu shot up from her seat, her face was paper white. Her flawless makeup looked grotesque and horrifying under the spotlight. She wasn't afraid of the video's content. She was afraid of the image of him making that call. For 14 years, she had thought that call was made to a lawyer. Now she knew it was to her. The rear doors of the hall were pushed open. A man walked in. Faded dark blue work clothes, a canvas tool bag slung over his shoulder. A gaunt frame. Haircut very short. Flecks of white at his temples. His steps weren't fast, but each one landed solidly, as if he had walked a very long way to get here. When Rugu saw him, her lips opened and opened again without sound, like a fish pulled from the water. A sound squeezed from her throat, so faint it was barely audible. Fu Chen. Fu Chen didn't look at her. He walked past her, the rhythm of his steps unchanged. He walked to the circular podium, took an old laptop from his tool bag, placed it on the lectern and opened the screen. A single line of code was displayed. The comment field read in English. This module written by Fu Chen. Unauthorized modification prohibited. If you see this line, it means the code has not been tampered with. He raised his head and addressed the more than 1,000 global delegates seated before him. This is the core module of the original version of Flint. Meng Yangji embedded it, untouched, into all subsequent versions, including the Flint 2.0 you are preparing to vote to certify today. He didn't understand this code, so he never changed it. But what he didn't know was that this code contains a verification backdoor I planted 14 years ago. Input specific parameters, and it will output all decision logs that the system has concealed, altered, or deleted. He struck the Enter key. A dense scrolling list erupted across the screen, a record of every incident over the past decade, across 68 countries worldwide, that Flint had internally flagged as a high-risk decision, but externally disclosed as a safe decision. The list scrolled for over a minute without reaching the end. Each record contained the time, location, decision content, internal rating, external version, and a discrepancy explanation. One record took place 2 years ago in London. A hospital ICU was using Flint to allocate ventilators. The system internally flagged a 67-year-old COVID patient as high survivability, but positioned her last in the queue for external output. The reason? The patient's daughter was an investigative journalist currently writing an exposé on Yangji Technologies' suspected monopolistic practices. The system's decision log noted, recommend priority downgrade, reference external data, patient family member social behavior risk score, high risk. The patient died of respiratory failure on the 4th day of waiting for a ventilator. The external version showed, patient placed at low priority due to age factor. Decision basis, clinical guideline standards. There were hundreds more entries in the list. Every single one followed the same pattern. Flint's decisions were not based on the ethical principles it claimed, but on a secret social risk scoring algorithm that comprehensively analyzed each decision subject's social relationships, political leanings, and consumption habits, then quietly embedded the analysis results into the decision-making process. This segment of code was precisely the module Meng Yangji had copied intact from Fu Chen's computer 14 years ago, layer upon layer of encapsulation and iteration over 14 years, never truly scrutinized by anyone. Meng Yangji had no idea it had this function. For 14 years he had repeatedly declared that Flint is a transparent, just AI system free of bias, winning countless ethics certifications and awards on that basis. He didn't even know that those unjust decisions were continuously occurring inside the system. The entire auditorium was dead silent, and then it erupted. Journalists surged toward the front, hoisting cameras. The glare of flashbulbs knitted itself into a false daylight. The ethics committee members, their faces ashen, all pulled out their phones to contact their respective ministries. Security guards stood helplessly on either side of the podium. Meng Yangji collapsed onto the steps behind the podium. His mouth twitched as he repeated over and over, I didn't know. I truly didn't know this was possible. Impossible. I only copied that code. Impossible. He admitted it. In front of everyone. In front of the live broadcast cameras. In front of the representatives of the ethics committees of 47 nations. He admitted that he had copied the code. When Rugu stood before her seat, both hands bracing against the edge of the table, her fingernails digging into the lacquer of the solid wood surface. Her expression was a blankness from which even fear had been drained. Her phone vibrated frantically. It was a call from Yangji Technologies' PR director. She didn't answer. Fu Chan closed the laptop, placed it back in his tool bag, and from start to finish never raised his voice. There was no anger, no sarcasm, not even an extra glance spared for Meng Yangji. He had simply done what he came to do, and now he turned and left. When he reached the door he stopped walking. He didn't turn his head. When Rugu. He spoke her name. The first time in 14 years. When Rugu trembled from head to toe. That copy of Critique of Pure Reason you gave me back then. On the flyleaf you wrote, May we never become the people we despise. I still have the book. The flyleaf is yellowed now. Do you want it back? When Rugu did not answer. She stood there, her elegant suit searingly bright under the camera lights. Silent tears had carved a single track through her makeup, running from the corner of her eye down to her jawline. It looked like a crack. Fu Chen waited 3 seconds. Receiving no reply, he pushed the door open and disappeared into the shadows of the hallway. Behind him, beneath the dome of the Palais des Nations, An empire worth 3 trillion was collapsing. The sound of the collapse was not a thunderous roar, but the fine, crisp noise of a billion pieces of shattered glass, hitting the floor simultaneously, piercing, dense, irreversible. Almost simultaneously with Fu Qian's departure from the Palais des Nations, an avalanche struck the global capital markets. Yangji Technology's stock price went into freefall within 40 seconds of the live broadcast, being simulcast by global media. The first sell order came from Singapore. The amount wasn't large, but it was a pebble dropped into a still pond. Then came London, New York, Tokyo, Hong Kong. Sell orders poured in simultaneously from 31 trading centers around the world. The market maker's defensive capital was smashed through in an instant. The star market's circuit breaker mechanism was triggered twice in the first 3 minutes of trading. There is no circuit breaker in Hong Kong. Yangji Technology's 8 shares evaporated 71% of their value in 45 minutes. All the sell orders ultimately converged toward a single source, a fund registered in Luxembourg called Abyss. This fund had begun secretly building positions in Yangji Technology put options 7 months earlier, with a total scale exceeding $2 billion. The actual controller was the very man who had been repairing circuit boards for 14 years in a Chengdu second-hand market. Yangji Technology's market value collapsed from $3 trillion to less than $300 billion in a single day. A Wall Street analyst used a single phrase during the emergency broadcast: financial nuclear detonation. After closing its positions, the Abyss Fund sent an open letter to global investors. It contained only a single paragraph. "We are not making money. We are settling an account for a man who was robbed of 14 years. Luxembourg. An emergency shareholders meeting of Yangji Technology was convened the day after the Supreme Court's ruling. Tang Wen, representing the Abyss Fund, walked into the conference room holding only a single document, a proposal jointly signed by 47 shareholders to dismiss the board of directors. He sat down at the long table, spread the document flat, and stated in a tone stripped of any superfluous emotion, "Pursuant to Article 459 of the Luxembourg Companies Law, our party has gathered authorization from shareholders representing more than 30% of voting rights to request the immediate dismissal of the existing board of directors and the filing of criminal charges. The independent investigator appointed by us will enter all of your company's global data centers in 1 hour." Meng Yangji did not attend. He was currently being detained by the Swiss Federal Police in a Geneva detention center, awaiting extradition. The extradition papers listed 4 charges: attempted intentional homicide, infringement of trade secrets, endangering public safety, and cross-border money laundering. Wenrugu had also received a notice of assistance in investigation. On the afternoon all her offshore assets were frozen. She sat alone in the garden of the now emptied executive residential compound. Autumn had come, and ginkgo leaves covered the ground. She dug through her purse and found her phone, locating Fu Qian's number. A number she had thought had long since been deactivated. She didn't dial it. She deleted the number, took out the SIM card, snapped it in half and threw it in the trash. She knew that dialing would be pointless. Some debts cannot be settled with a phone call. 14 years. A life. A man who had crawled out of the abyss on his own would not give her any more words. The families of the victims of the 44 fatal accidents, represented by Tang Wen's legal team, initiated the largest class action lawsuit in the history of China's AI field. The defendants were Yangji Technology Group, its principal shareholders, and all its directors. The trial opened at the Beijing Intellectual Property Court, lasted nearly 3 months, and saw over 200 witnesses called. During the trial, Tang Wen presented an airtight chain of evidence. First group: Fu Qian's original laboratory records from 14 years ago, scanned copies of 73 handwritten notebooks, documenting the complete derivation process of flint from concept to its finished form. Second group: audio recordings of Meng Yangji at internal meetings repeatedly admitting that core code was written by Fu Qian. To this day, I still haven't fully understood it. Third group: the complete incident logs of all those decisions Flint had internally flagged as high risk but externally concealed, verified as authentic by an independent third-party forensic institution. The most lethal was the fourth group, a technical demonstration Fu Qian personally gave in court. He ran the original Flint source code right there in the courtroom, input the verification parameters, And the system output hidden decision logs that even Meng Yangji himself had never seen. The logs revealed that the social risk scoring module had exerted non-public influence on more than 1,700,000 decisions over 14 years. 1,700,000 decisions. Every single one based on secret, unknown standards. Every single one presented to the outside world cloaked in the guise of an objective algorithm. The gallery was packed with the victims' families. Li Sufan, the mother who lost her 9-year-old daughter that stormy night in Guangzhou, sat in the front row, holding her daughter's memorial portrait. Sun Lanying, who lost her mother in that London ventilator allocation, sat beside her, clutching a voice recorder. 44 memorial portraits formed a row in the gallery, silently watching the courtroom. Ultimately, the court ordered Yangji Technology to pay a total of over 2.3 billion yuan in compensation to all the victimized families, and to publish a public apology in national-level media for 30 consecutive days. All assets under Meng Yangji's personal name were confiscated to supplement enforcement of the ruling. The criminal portion of the case was to be tried separately. On the day of the verdict, Sun Lanying stood on the steps outside the courthouse and spoke a single sentence to the media. He wasn't killed by Flint. He was killed by a lie. Fu Chun did not attend the trial. He had submitted all his technical evidence as a third-party technical assistant and then left. That afternoon, he went to Babaishan Cemetery and placed a bouquet of daisies before Sun Lanying's mother's grave. A month later, the complete source code for Flint 2.0 was officially launched on the world's largest open-source community. Fu Chun registered an account under his real name. His profile picture was a section of charred network cable. The repository's description was a single sentence. Steal the fire from Mount Olympus and give it back to everyone who needs it for warmth. Within 48 hours of going open source, more than 400,000 developers worldwide had cloned the repository. After the initial frenzy, the tech community fell into a strange silence, not because the code was bad but because it was too good. So good it was unsettling. Flint 2.0's architecture completely circumvented all current mainstream AI's dependence on massive computational power. Based on causal entanglement networks, it could run a complete general AI model on an ordinary computer. No GPU clusters required. No TPU arrays. No training costs running into the hundreds of millions of dollars. A $500 home computer could run it. A senior researcher at Google DeepMind wrote in an internal forum, "What took us a decade and tens of billions of dollars to do? This man achieved in 14 years in a rented room. And we didn't even know his name until today." Engineers from several top Silicon Valley AI companies spontaneously organized a code review, analyzing Flint 2.0's core modules line by line. The more they reviewed, the quieter they became. A chief architect at OpenAI wrote in a technical blog, "The mathematical foundation of this code doesn't exist in any existing paper. It's not an improvement on a known algorithm. It redefines what machine understanding means from the axiomatic level." I spent 3 weeks reading through the core modules, and it felt like someone had tossed a roadmap for the next 30 years of technology right in front of us. Fu Chun did not respond to these evaluations. He left a single pinned post in the repository's issue section. Have a question, ask. Find a bug, report it. Take the code for yourself. No need to thank me, no need to praise me, no need to worship. Fire isn't meant to be worshipped. It's meant to be passed on. Another half-year passed. UNESCO incorporated the Flint 2.0 open-source license into global AI ethics standards, mandating that all commercial AI systems must open their complete decision logs to independent third-party review bodies. This standard was later called the Fu Chun Clause by the global tech community. The core of the clause was one principle: an algorithm must withstand scrutiny in the sunlight. Any AI system that refuses to disclose its complete decision logs shall not be connected to public infrastructure. In the same month, the Return to Zero Charitable Foundation, established by Fu Chun using a portion of the Abyss Fund's profits, officially launched with an initial endowment of 30 billion yuan. It was dedicated to funding 2 specific groups: families victimized by technological crimes and independent developers worldwide working on open-source AI safety. The foundation set no application thresholds. It didn't require filling out complex forms. It didn't audit so-called qualifications. When it identified someone who needed help, the money arrived. The sole condition was, those who received help should, when they were able in the future, help another person in need. Fu Chan called this condition the fire-passing clause. The first beneficiary, Sun Lanying, didn't ask for money. She asked Fu Chan if he could help her build a truly transparent AI-assisted investigative system, so that journalists around the world could use it to track algorithmic bias in public decision-making. Fu Chan said yes. He spent 3 months personally leading a team to build it. Fully open source. He named it Lanying. On the day the system went live, Sun Lanying used it to retrieve medical resource allocation data from the health ministries of 17 countries over the past 5 years. In 40 minutes, she found 32 anomalous decision records that would previously have taken months of investigation to uncover. After testing it, she sent Fu Chan an email. The body contained only a single word. Worth it. Fu Chan didn't reply. He took a screenshot of that one word and saved it in an encrypted folder. The folder was named, The Meaning of Being Alive. Inside that folder were other things as well. A photo of Li Sufin's daughter Xiaohe, the list of victims from the 44 accidents, a scanned copy of Meng Yangji's final criminal verdict, a photo of the flyleaf of that copy of Critique of Pure Reason Wenrugu had given him. None of these items were kept for hatred. They were for remembering. He had said it, the abyss is the best calibrator, but only if you don't forget what it looked like inside the abyss. In the same week as the final criminal verdict, Fu Chan appeared at the second-hand market by the Funan River in Chengdu for the last time. He folded up the folding table and the canvas chair he'd used for 14 years and loaded them into the trunk of an old van. Old Lu, who sold second-hand stereos at the neighboring stall, helped him carry his things, muttering, "Ling Mute, you're move-in? Where to?" Fu Chan wiped the dust from the oscilloscope screen with his sleeve and said, "Back to Beijing." Old Lu froze. He'd known Ling Budu for 14 years and had never heard him string more than 3 words together in a single breath. Fu Chan put the last tin of rosin into the toolbox, closed the trunk and turned to Old Lu, extending his hand. Old Lu shook his hand and suddenly felt that this silent man had a surprisingly firm grip. His palm was covered with thick calluses. Old Lu said, "You ain't mute. You got a pretty nice voice, actually." Fu Chan smiled. The first time he had smiled in 14 years. The sunlight fell on his face, spreading wrinkles from the corners of his eyes, but his eyes were very bright. He said, "Before I didn't feel like I had anything worth saying. Now I do." After returning to Beijing, Fu Chan rented a small courtyard house in an alley near Tsinghua University. There was an old locust tree in the yard, with a stone table and stone stools beneath it. He set up his oscilloscope and soldering iron in a workshop converted from a side room and continued repairing things. Only this time it wasn't other people's appliances he was fixing, but the prototype submitted by the independent developers funded by the Return to Zero Foundation. He personally tested, disassembled, and resoldered every prototype, writing his feedback on a sticky note and attaching it to the casing. A crowd gradually gathered in the courtyard. Young engineers fresh out of Tsinghua, seasoned architects who had quit high-paying Silicon Valley jobs to return to China for open-source work, small entrepreneurs whose ideas had been stolen by big companies, researchers who had been fighting alone in the field of AI ethics for years. None of them came to ask Fu Chan for money. They came to work alongside him. Fu Chan welcomed them all. His only requirement was, whatever you make must be open source. Someone asked him why. He said fire shouldn't be locked in a safe. By the 3rd year back in Beijing, the Return to Zero Foundation had funded independent AI safety researchers in over 42 countries and advanced the revision of 11 pieces of legislation related to algorithmic transparency worldwide. One day, Fu Chan returned to Tsinghua to give a lecture titled, "What Was Stolen and What Was Rebuilt?" There was no PPT on the podium, no demo video, just the 14-year-old laptop and that length of charred network cable. After the lecture, a bespectacled student raised his hand and asked, "Professor Fu, you had 14 years stolen from you. Do you regret it?" Fu Chan thought for a very long time. So long that people in the classroom started coughing. Then he said, "No regrets. If those 14 years hadn't been stolen, I might have turned into another Meng Yangji. The abyss is the best calibrator. It tells you who you are and what technology should be used for." He paused and picked up the charred network cable. This cable was connected to the server at the time I fell. I've kept it for 14 years. Not to hold a grudge but to remember. Some lines once broken shouldn't be reconnected. But you can use it for something else. Like cutting off the burnt end, attaching a new line, and connecting it to a new world. After the lecture ended, that bespectacled student waited at the classroom door for a long time. He told Fu Chan that his doctoral thesis's core algorithm had been taken by his advisor and patented. His advisor had become the academic leader in the field, and his name had been completely erased. He asked Fu Chan what he should do. Fu Chan pulled a USB drive from his tool bag and handed it to him. There's an open source architecture on here. Take it and use it. Put your own name on it. Don't waste time hating your advisor. Spend your time building something better than his. The best revenge isn't pulling the other person down. It's climbing up yourself, and then lowering the ladder for those behind you. 6 months later, that student released a security auditing tool built on Flint 2.0 on GitHub. It was adopted by multiple independent media organizations around the world. In the acknowledgement section of his repository he wrote, "Thanks to a man who repaired circuit boards for 14 years. He taught me ladders aren't for revenge. They're for helping people climb out of the abyss." Fu Chan and a group of young engineers built a small computing center in an abandoned mine pit deep in the mountains of Guizhou. At the entrance to the pit hung a sign pieced together from discarded circuit boards, crookedly carved with 2 characters, Flint. Below the sign was a small line of text, carved by Fu Chen's own hand. Fire should not be locked in a safe. The computing center specialized in developing low-cost, AI-assisted medical systems for underserved regions. The team numbered only 30-plus people, dispersed across 7 countries, working remotely through open-source collaboration. Fu Chan didn't appoint project managers, didn't require weekly reports, and held no routine meetings. The only collaboration rule was written at the very bottom of the repository's README. What you build, the entire world must be able to use, modify, and distribute for free. Any code that violates this rule, don't submit it here. That winter, heavy snow fell in Guizhou. Inside the server room converted from a mine pit, the window looked out on a white blanketed valley, while the green indicator lights on dozens of servers blinked inside. Fu Chan sat before an old mechanical keyboard, debugging an AI model for diagnosing early-stage lung cancer. Built on Flint 2.0's causal entanglement network, this model didn't need high-resolution CT images. It could identify early-stage malignant tendencies in tiny nodules using just a regular X-ray, ideally suited for remote clinics that couldn't afford expensive tests. He was tweaking parameters when his phone buzzed. A message from Sun Laneying. It was snowing in London. She had just used the Laneying system to dig up a major scandal involving a certain country's health ministry. During the pandemic, the department had used an unverified algorithm to allocate vaccine resources, giving priority supply to wealthy neighborhoods. The story would break tomorrow. At the end of the message, she typed that single word again. Worth it. Fu Chan looked at it for a long while, then turned off the phone screen. Outside the window, the heavy snow continued to fall. Inside the server room, there was only the sound of the keyboard and the hum of the server fans. He went on typing code with his fingers red from the cold, line after line, as steady as when he repaired circuit boards at that folding table in Chengdu 14 years ago. Only this time he was no longer fixing other people's things. He was building his own. Another 2 years passed. Flint 2.0's global deployment exceeded 8 million nodes, covering hundreds of scenarios from medical diagnosis to agricultural irrigation, from post-disaster rescue to endangered language preservation. The global open-source community spontaneously derived over 17,000 vertical applications based on Flint, all free and open source. The tech media called this movement the Flint Revolution. In a rare interview, Fu Chan was asked what he thought of that term. He said fire doesn't belong to any single person. It was always in everyone's hands. He simply kicked down the door that was blocking the way. The interviewing journalist also asked, "Do you hate Ming Yangji?" Fu Chan said hate is a very heavy thing. You carry it with you every day as you walk, and it doesn't help you walk faster. It only makes you more tired. He paused and then added, and besides, I no longer need to hate. The things I have built are 100 times better than what he stole. The best revenge isn't making the other person miserable. It's living well enough yourself. Well enough that those stolen years are no longer a loss, but merely a prologue. A year later, Meng Yangji's final criminal verdict was delivered at the Shenzhen Intermediate People's Court. Attempted intentional homicide, infringement of trade secrets, data fabrication endangering public safety, money laundering, bribery. Multiple offenses combined, sentenced to life imprisonment, deprived of political rights for life. As the judge pronounced the sentence, Meng Yangji stood in the defendant's box. His hair was completely white, his body stooped. His academician's badge had long been confiscated. His suit was replaced by a prison uniform. In the gallery, 44 memorial portraits watched him in silence. After the sentencing, Meng Yangji was escorted out of the courtroom by bailiffs. At the end of the hallway, he turned his head and glanced back at the gallery. A man was sitting in the corner of the very last row, wearing a gray shirt. Gaunt frame. Hair very short. Temples completely white. The man didn't step forward. He didn't speak. He just sat quietly. Their gazes collided in the air for a moment. Meng Yangji's lips trembled violently. He wanted to say something, but the bailiffs were already pushing him around the corner. Fu Chan stood up, walked to the third row of the gallery, and stopped in front of Li Sufan. Li Sufan was wearing plain clothes that day, holding her daughter Xiaohe's photo against her chest. Fu Chan did not speak. He bowed deeply. He held the bow for a long time, longer than she had expected. Then he straightened up and said to Li Sufan, "I wrote Xiaohe's name into the source code annotations of Flint 2.0. Everyone who uses this system from now on will see her name." Li Sufan said nothing. Tears slid silently down her face. In the photo she held, the little girl was smiling radiantly. A few months later, the Return to Zero Foundation held its first global open-source AI safety summit at the Guizhou Computing Center. No luxurious venue. No crystal chandeliers. No champagne. Right there in the server room converted from a mine pit, independent developers from over 30 countries sat around among the server racks, sharing roasted sweet potatoes and bottled water that had been carried up the mountain. Fu Chan sat in a corner, listening to each person talk about what they were working on. Someone was developing a mosquito-borne disease prediction model for rural Africa. Someone was restoring old devices deliberately phased out by monopolistic companies to give them new life. Someone was building a distributed identity verification system for climate migrants who had lost their homes. When it was Fu Chen's turn to speak, he said only a few sentences. 14 years ago, when I fell from that 52nd floor, I thought my life was over. But after spending 14 years in the abyss, I discovered one thing. I wasn't alone down there. There are so many people crushed, discarded, and forgotten by this era. They don't lack talent. They lack opportunity. That's why I open source Flint, why I named the foundation Return to Zero. It's not because I'm magnanimous. It's because I know, if someone had handed me a ladder back then, I wouldn't have had to spend 14 years in the abyss. He sat down. The server room was silent for a few seconds. Then, a young developer from Nigeria stood up and started clapping. Then everyone stood. The applause echoed in the depths of the mine pit for a long time. After the meeting, a young engineer pushed through the crowd and came up to Fu Chan. "Professor Fu, I want to stay in Guizhou and build things with you." Fu Chan glanced at him. "What's your name?" The young man said, "My surname is Meng." He paused. "Meng Yangji is my uncle." The server room suddenly went quiet. Several engineers who had been packing up equipment stopped in their tracks. Fu Chan looked at the young man. He looked at him for a long time, then asked, "Do you know how to repair circuit boards?" The young man froze for a second. "I've studied it. I'm not an expert." Fu Chan pulled a soldering iron from his toolbox and handed it to him. "Go fix the power supply on that broken server over there. If you can't fix it, come ask me." He turned and took 2 steps, then looked back. "You are you. Your uncle is your uncle. Flint doesn't practice guilt by association." That night, heavy snow fell again in Guizhou. Fu Chan sat alone outside the server room, gazing at the valley blanketed in snow. His phone lit up. A message from that young man surnamed Meng. "The power supply is fixed. The soldering iron is still hot. Thank you, Professor Fu." Fu Chan put the phone in his pocket and pulled out something from inside his jacket. A photo of him and Wen Ruger from 14 years ago. The words she had written on the back were already blurred. May we never become the people we despise. He looked at it for a long time. Then he flipped the photo over so the image faced the snowy night, and set it down on the stone step. Snowflakes fell upon the photo, one after another, covering those two young faces. He stood up, turned around, walked back into the server room, and closed the door. Outside the window the snow fell thick and heavy. Inside the server room, the green indicator lights flickered like a field of stars. His fingers returned to the keyboard, continuing to write code that the whole world could use. Line after line. Steady and light. Like snow falling into a valley. Like fire stolen from Mount Olympus. Given back to everyone who needs it for warmth. Many years later, someone asked Fu-chan what the true meaning of the name Flint was. He said, "Flint is the stone ancient people used to strike sparks. You knock two pieces of flint together and a spark leaps out. The spark lands on dry moss, and the moss catches fire. The moss ignites twigs, the twigs ignite a bonfire. The bonfire lights up a cave, the cave becomes a village, the village becomes a city. But the starting point of it all was just that instant when two stones struck each other." He said, technology is that flint. It doesn't belong to any single person, any single company, any single country. It belongs to everyone willing to use it to light up the darkness. Someone asked another question. Then, do you consider yourself the flint? Fu-chan shook his head. He said, I am just the person who found the flint in the abyss. I cleaned it off, struck a spark, and handed it to everyone in the darkness. The fire was always inside the stone. I just didn't let it rot in the mud. What happened after that? Those are the fire's own stories. The first batch of results from the Guizhou Computing Center spread rapidly across the globe after going open source. The malaria prediction model in Africa raised diagnostic accuracy by 40 percentage points. The flood early warning system in South Asia advanced evacuation times by a full 72 hours. The rainforest illegal logging monitoring network in South America tripled the detection rate of illegal deforestation. All of these systems were built on Flint 2.0. All were free and open source. All ran without expensive hardware support. The United Nations Development Program released a report calling the Flint open source license the most transformative technology sharing model of the digital age. The report noted that over the past 3 years, the economic value and social benefits created for underdeveloped regions worldwide by open source applications built on Flint exceeded the combined total of all commercial AI projects over the previous 2 decades. When Fu-chan saw this report, he was in the Guizhou server room debugging a newly arrived liquid-cooled server. He forwarded the report link to the team chat group with a single line of text. Keep working. Someone asked him why he didn't say a few more words. He said code is more useful than words. When Rugu, out on bail pending trial, was restricted from leaving the country. She lived alone in a rented room on the outskirts of Beijing. Every day she reported to the local police station, then bought vegetables at the nearby wet market, went home, cooked, watched TV, and slept. None of her neighbors knew she had once been the COO of the most valuable company in the world. All her assets had been frozen. Her bank card held only a basic living allowance of 1,500 yuan a month. She learned to haggle at the market, learned to wait for sales at the supermarket, learned to use a hot water bottle instead of the heater in winter. One day, after reporting at the police station, she sat for a long time on a bench in a nearby park. An old man came and sat next to her and asked if she was feeling unwell. She said she was fine, just a little cold. The old man handed her a hand warmer, saying, "Take it, I have another one at home." When Rugu took the hand warmer, and tears suddenly started falling. She couldn't quite say why she was crying. Not because of the cold. Not because of poverty. Not because she had lost everything. It was because this hand warmer was a gift from a stranger. No expectation of return, no questions asked, simply given because she looked cold. She thought of what she had done to Fu-chan so many years ago. She thought of the betrayal behind that word, all right. She thought of the back of the figure falling from the window. She thought of the words she herself had spoken in that broadcast. The cheap envy of failures directed at the successful. She was now the failure. But she felt no envy. She only felt cold. And the person who handed her the hand warmer, she had once had the chance to become that person. But she hadn't. She never contacted Fu-chan again. She knew he was already in a world that no longer needed her apology. Some people, after climbing out of the abyss, fill it in so that no one behind them will fall. And she was the one who had pushed him in. That fact would not change with the passage of time. Meng Yangji's life in prison was extremely regimented. Wake up at 6 every morning to make his bed. Morning exercises at 7, labor reform starting at 8. He was assigned to the prison printing shop, doing typesetting and proofreading. Ironically, many of the printed materials he proofread were promotional pamphlets about laws and regulations on AI ethics. He behaved well, never caused trouble, never argued, never mentioned his past. The inmates in his cell block didn't know who he had been, only that this white-haired old man was very quiet, occasionally scribbling formulas they couldn't understand on scraps of paper, then crumpling them up and tossing them into the trash. The prison library had an old computer that couldn't connect to the internet, installed with some legal databases and basic office software. Meng Yangji was allowed to spend an hour in the library every day after his shift in the printing shop. On that old computer, he wrote a very long article titled Reflections on the Underlying Architecture of Causal Entanglement Networks. No outlet for publication. No readers. He wrote it only for himself to read. When he reached the 3rd chapter, he suddenly stopped and deleted the entire document. Not because he couldn't continue writing. It was because he had finally understood the true structure of that piece of code Fu Chun had written 14 years ago. In the moment of understanding, he realized that even if he were given another 14 years, he could never produce something like it. Some gaps between people cannot be bridged by effort. And he had tried to cross that gap with theft and violence. What he ultimately destroyed wasn't Fu Chun. It was himself. Many years later, the prison organized inmates to watch a science and technology news program. The screen was reporting on Flint 2.0's latest achievements in medical diagnosis in Africa. The camera swept over a photograph. Fu Chun standing in front of the Guizhou mine pit server room, surrounded by a crowd of young developers from all over the world, everyone laughing. Meng Yangji sat before the television, expressionless. A young inmate next to him asked, "Old man Meng, weren't you an AI? Do you understand this Flint thing?" Meng Yangji was silent for a very long time. Then he said, "I don't understand it." The young inmate gave a scoff. "Knew you wouldn't." Meng Yangji didn't speak again. He lowered his head and continued folding the cardboard boxes in his hands. It was manual piecework assigned by the prison printing shop, folding misprinted pamphlets into packaging boxes. He folded them very meticulously, pressing every edge and corner perfectly flat. In the 3rd year after her daughter Xiaohe's death, Li Sufan quit her old job and joined the Return to Zero Foundation as a full-time volunteer. She didn't understand technology. She couldn't write code. But she could do one thing: sit and talk with the family members of victims who had just lost their loved ones. She said she knew that feeling. She knew the hallucination of waking in the middle of the night thinking your child is still in the next room. She knew that sensation of a knife twisting in your chest when you see other people's children coming home from school. She knew the rage you feel, wanting to strangle the next person who tells you that time heals all wounds. She didn't need to offer reasons. She didn't need to give advice. She only needed to sit there and listen. Those who had just lost someone saw her, and they knew they were not the first to fall into this particular abyss. There were others in the abyss. Holding hands, they could climb up together. Once, Fu Chun went to the foundation's office to handle some business and saw Li Sufan sitting with an old grandmother who had just arrived from Gansu. The old woman's son had been a ride-hailing driver who died 3 years earlier in an accident involving an AI dispatch system. She couldn't speak Mandarin. Li Sufan couldn't speak the Gansu dialect. They sat facing each other, one crying, the other handing over tissues. Not a single word spoken. Fu Chun didn't interrupt them. He stood at the doorway for a moment, then turned and left. Back in the car, he said to Tang Wen, "The foundation's money. Direct a bit more towards Sufan's area from now on. What she's doing is more important than all of us put together." Tang Wen nodded and jotted it down in his notebook. After so many years of working with Fu Chun, he had learned one thing: don't ask why. Just do it. Because Fu Chun's judgment was almost never wrong. Sun Laniying's Laniying system saw wider and wider adoption in the global investigative journalism community. Within 3 years, investigative reports completed using Laniying had exposed algorithmic abuses by governments and corporations in 17 countries, prompting the revision of 9 related pieces of legislation. For this, she was awarded the Global Press Freedom Prize. At the awards ceremony, the host asked her who she most wanted to thank. She said 3 names: her mother, Li Sufan, and Fu Chan. She said her mother taught her what justice was, Sufan taught her what strength was, and Fu Chan taught her what technology should be. The broadcast of the awards was projected onto a wall in the Guizhou mine pit server room. Everyone on the team gathered around to watch. When Sun Lanying said Fu Chan's name, everyone turned their heads in unison to look at him. Fu Chan was expressionlessly debugging a server, but the tips of his ears turned red. A young engineer whispered to the person next to him, "Professor Fu is blushing. Quick, screenshot it." The screenshot was later posted in the team chat group with the caption, "The father of Flint's moment of social death." Fu Chan replied in the group with a single period. Then he added, "Server maintenance today. Everyone knock off early." It was the closest he came to humor. Few more years passed. The Return to Zero Foundation established 12 branch centers across 5 continents, funding over 3,000 independent developers and more than 200 victimized families. The inside cover of the foundation's annual report bore a single line, a scan of Fu Chen's handwriting. "Returning to zero is not zero. It is beginning again. Every return to zero is a reboot. Every reboot is a choice." Someone asked Fu Chan why the foundation was called Return to Zero. He said, "Because what people fear most is not failure. It's the inability to return to zero. Being too afraid to admit you've walked the wrong path. Too afraid to clear the past to zero, too afraid to say, 'I lost, I'm starting over.'" He spent 14 years in the abyss, returning to zero every single day. Clearing his past identity to zero. Clearing his past achievements to zero. Clearing his past hatred to zero. And then asking himself, "What can I do today?" Even if it's just one thing, just repairing one board, just writing one line of code, then this day was not wasted. 14 years. He returned to zero countless times. Each return to zero brought him closer to the person he truly wanted to become. Later, someone asked him what his greatest achievement was. He said it wasn't Flint. It wasn't the Abyss Fund. It wasn't the code that changed the world. It was that bowl of ice jelly old Lu handed him when he was packing up his stall at the second-hand market. That day in Chengdu, it was 100 degrees Fahrenheit. He had been repairing boards for the entire day. His work clothes soaked through with sweat. Old Lu walked over carrying a bowl of ice jelly and said, "Ling Mute, take a break. Have some ice jelly. It's on me." He said at that moment he felt he had come back to life. Not because the ice jelly was delicious, but because someone without any reason was kind to him. Not for his technology. Not for his name. Not for his achievements. Just because he was there, having fixed boards under the scorching sun all day. A person who needed a rest. He said the scariest thing in life isn't having someone hate you. It's having no one care about you. That bowl of ice jelly from Old Lu told him that someone cared. Even if it was just a 50-cent bowl of ice jelly, it was enough to make a man who had spent 14 years in the abyss believe again. This world is worth it. From then on, he no longer hated Meng Yangji. Not because of forgiveness. It was because he had already received something more precious than revenge. The warmth of that bowl of ice jelly lasted longer than hatred. The Guizhou Mine Pit Computing Center continued to expand. From the initial 30-some people, it grew to over 200. From a single mine pit, it expanded to the 3 adjacent ones. The underground tunnels between the pits were converted into laboratories and meeting rooms. The walls were covered with postcards and handwritten letters sent by developers from all over the world. Every letter carried the same sentence, in different languages: "Thank you." One letter came from a village in the Congo. The village clinic had used a malaria diagnosis system built on Flint, reducing the misdiagnosis rate from 60% to 8% in 3 months. The letter was handwritten, the penmanship crooked. The last line in English read, "We do not know who you are, but we know you are a good person." Fu Chan framed this letter and hung it in the most prominent spot in the server room. Next to it were the photo of Li Sufan's daughter Xiaohe, the dried flower specimen of the daisies placed on Sun Lanying's mother's grave, and the photocopy of the flyleaf of that copy of Critique of Pure Reason given by Wenrugu, The handwriting on the flyleaf was already blurred, but you could still make out the outline of "May we never become the people we despise." Someone asked him why he hung all these things together. He said, "These are all fire. Some come from the abyss, some come from the light, but they can all ignite." Many, many more years passed. Fu Chen's hair turned completely white. He no longer wrote code himself, devoting his main energy to cultivating the next generation of open-source developers. His students were spread all over the world. Some became university professors. Some became independent developers. Some became technical advisors at the UN. Some worked in tech-driven poverty alleviation in remote mountain villages. Every year, on the winter solstice, he would return to the Guizhou mine pit and spend the winter with the young people there. On the winter solstice, they would cook a huge pot of dumplings in the mine pit, and everyone would gather around to eat. After the dumplings were finished, Fu Chan would sit on the steps of the server room and tell the young people a story. Every year it was the same story, about a young man who fell from the 52nd floor, spent 14 years in the abyss, then climbed out and passed the fire to everyone in the darkness. Someone asked him if the story was true. He said, "The truth of the story doesn't matter. What matters is whether the fire is passed on." He pointed outside the server room, at the valley blanketed in snow. He said, "Look, every light out there is a fire. The places where those lights shine were once an abyss." The young people looked in the direction of his pointing finger. In the snowy night, the village in the distant valley glimmered with scattered lights, like stars strewn across the earth. Behind them, the green indicator lights of the mine pit server room pulsed, and the sound of keyboards and the hum of server fans formed an ancient and steady rhythm. Fu Chun stood up and brushed the snow from his knees. He was old. Standing up was a little slower than before. But once he steadied himself, his steps were still solid, as if he had walked a very long way and still had a very long way to go. He walked into the server room and closed the door. Outside the window, the snow was still falling heavily. His fingers returned to the keyboard. Lines of code appeared on the screen. Not fixing bugs. Not optimizing performance. He was writing the most unremarkable part of the code, the comments. He was writing comments for the next version of Flint, making sure every person who came after could understand what he was thinking, why it was designed this way, which parts were intentional, which parts were reluctant compromises, and which parts still weren't good enough and needed those who came later to keep improving. He wrote. This code was written on a snowy night. It was very cold outside the window. The server room was very warm. I hope that you, reading this code, no matter where you are, no matter what kind of circumstances you're in, can find your own server room, your own fire. If you find it, please pass it on. No need to sign my name. Names aren't important. The fire is what matters. He typed the last line of the comment, saved the file, and committed it to the repository. The repository's commit log showed that this was the 47,321st commit since Flint went open source. Every single commit was a passing of the fire. From the window on the 52nd floor to the folding table in the Chengdu second-hand market. From the dome of the Palais des Nations to the conference room in Luxembourg. From the defendant's seat in the Beijing Intellectual Property Court to the green indicator lights in the Guizhou mine pit. From one person to another. From another to many more. The fire is not extinguished. Flint is silent.